Well, welcome everyone to the third Paths to Parenthood workshop. We're talking about achieving pregnancy through donated sperm, and we have these wonderful experts to talk about that. And thank you to Cassie Tien for organizing this, and you'll be moderating this discussion, which is great. I can't wait to see what you do, and I'll just sit down and have a sandwich.
Yeah, so it's really nice to meet everyone. My name is Cassie. I'm actually the Bridging the Gaps intern for Philly Family Pride this summer. I'm a second-year medical student at Penn, so I'm just working with PFP this summer, just helping them organize Paths to Parenthood and stuff like that. So yeah, we can get right to the discussion. So can everyone just introduce themselves briefly?
I'm Victoria. I am one midwife of a home birth practice called Refuge Midwifery. So a large part of our practice is home birth for people who are already pregnant, but then a specialty part of our practice is unmedicated preconception and IUI, and either doing like a one-on-one teaching of how to chart your own cycles for timing of IUI, or at home intracervical insemination. We'll talk about all of the things. So the pharmaceutical part of trying to get pregnant.
I'm Jackie Gutman, she, her, from RMA Philadelphia. I'm a reproductive endocrinologist. We do unmedicated IUIs as well as medicated IUIs, as well as IVF, directed donors, non-directed donors, and obviously we'll go into more detail.
I'm Ann Wagner. I'm in medical clothes, but I'm the only person today who's not here as a medical person. I just didn't go home and change yet. I'm a mom, and I achieved pregnancy using unknown donor sperm from a sperm bank through reciprocal IVF, though that was after a long journey of multiple routes of trying to achieve pregnancy, and we used multiple sperm banks during that process as well. And now have 2 children at home through that, and it was quite the journey, and it's awesome. Jackie was one of my reproductive endocrinologists, actually, and happy to share my experience of that whole process. We looked into many different routes of getting pregnant, and so happy to talk about whatever, share a little bit more about it later.
That's great. So it looks like we have a pretty diverse range of individuals with different experiences here. So I guess just to start off, could we get like a brief overview of what achieving pregnancy with donor sperm looks like the different routes that anyone can take?
Sure.
Yeah.
How do you want to do it?
Just I guess like go into like IUI and IVF. And
Right, but do you want us to ping pong? Do you what do you? How do you want to moderate?
Whoever can speak best.
I guess like the 101 version of it is that if you are trying to make a baby and then either of you or just you does not have sperm, you get to decide on if you pick somebody that you know that is local that can give you the sperm as you need it, or if you need to utilize a sperm bank as an institution, you can have somebody that you know donate sperm to the sperm bank and store it, or you can choose from anonymous sperm donors that are already kind of cataloged very much like Tinder.
Shockingly.
And I'm going to interrupt for just a second. So at this point, we don't even call them anonymous anymore, because in all honesty, when you think about the world as it is today, there really is no such thing as anonymity. And so even our professional society made the recommendation to change from anonymous to essentially pull the curtain up to either non-directed or unknown.
And in the world, as a person who was out there shopping for this, what you'll often see is unknown, anonymized sometimes, and then ID option is one of the popular jargons used. I don't think that's actually from medical organizations. I think it's one of the ones in the industry. And ID option is one that usually implies that at a certain age, I don't know if you've known anyone who's done organ donation, but there's the idea of at a certain age, a child born of a donor sperm, not the parent who utilized the donor sperm, but a child born of a donor sperm could reach out to the bank and say, this is my name, I was born of donor number blank, I want to send this letter to my donor. and that the donor has signed as a part of their contract that they're open to that kind of contact later in life. And that's the majority of donors that you find.
And that has evolved over time as well, so that was like that was an incredibly novel concept 25 years ago, and at this point, most of the banks, really all of the donors that they now process and accept are identity release, and different banks will do it somewhat differently. So some you can send a letter, some they provide contact information. I think for all of the banks, as you pointed out, it's for the kid as opposed to the parent. So the kid needs to typically be 18 to be able to get the information.
And down the line, I think probably later in the conversation, there's a lot to be said about the different ways as a prospective parent to process those kinds of decisions, and also a lot of different organizations out there, some of them run by by donor children who are now adults, that can offer a lot of great input. And I can talk more about that later.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Hey, that was really interesting, and it was interesting how you described like choosing a donor as like Tinder. So, could you speak a little bit more about that, and I guess overall, like the overall process of selecting a sperm donor and what factors like you considered?
Yeah. I think I could probably speak to that best because I didn't use a known donor. I can't speak much to that process, and there's a lot that goes into that, and you guys might have, if there's anyone in here who has known donor questions, you guys would probably have some really wise stuff about that. We didn't have anyone in our life. I'm, biologically able to carry children. There's no sperm in the equation in our relationship, so we knew we needed a donor always. We didn't know that I would need such advanced reproductive help for sure. I was, not yet what would have been considered advanced maternal age, didn't really anticipate having fertility problems. I don't think you should think of them that way, but just knew we would need technology of some kind. And given that we didn't have someone in our life who we knew could give us sperm, that we wanted to ask that question, we knew we would need to go the banking route. So everyone's different, and the first thing I always lead with is like, whatever decision you make is the right decision for your family because you're your family. And so none of the things I'm about to say about the way we made these decisions are said from a place of judgment, but there's a lot of decision making there. So we used a website called the Donor Sibling Registry, just for guidance and for like opinions from kids conceived of donors who are now in, over 18. And a lot of the overwhelming opinion we got was like, you are creating a child who has a biological connection with only one of their parents, and that carries a lot of weight. And so be really thoughtful about the decisions you make. And so we ended up, we were prioritizing that we wanted ID option, we wanted to be open with our kids, we wanted to feel like we went with a bank that had a lower family limit if possible. But that's also a luxury because the banks that have lower family limits often have higher costs and fewer donors. But then, when it comes down to the Tinder aspect of it's like there are search filters, and what mattered to us was that we intended to use my body to carry the baby and also my eggs to make the baby. So we wanted a donor that looked like my wife because that's what would happen if my wife could have sperm. So we went out and kind of like prioritized some of the medical stuff that was important to us, like CMV status, which your provider would talk to you about, just like little things that are important. And then, some physical attributes that looked like my wife. And then we just, we personally went with a bank that had a 10 family limit. So 10 families could be created by that donor before they stopped the donor from donating. I've heard of 10.
Which is much lower than
Yes.
most of the
20 and 30
banks.
is more common. That's the Sperm Bank of California, not California Cryo Bank, the Sperm Bank, TSBC. However, that was many years ago. I will just say, full disclosure, I paid a lot less for sperm than sperm is costing right now, and that was only a few years ago. And they had more donors then than I've heard they had now. But because they were available, we went with them. They also are known to run their own donor sibling contact list, as opposed to you needing to kind of go on to because there are websites out there where you can say, I was with the Sperm Bank of California, this was our donor number, I want to connect with other families. They offer their own optional, you don't have to opt into it, but donor sibling contact list. So that was why we went with them. In the end, the ironic thing is that I was unable to conceive through multiple rounds of different things. We ended up using my wife's eggs, so our sons just look like my wife. because they ended up being with a donor that looked like her. So they're beautiful. They look nothing like me. They're 100% her. But it was hard. It was weird. I didn't enjoy the process of the Tinder-like process of setting search filters to pick a donor because it felt very pressured. It felt very strange, and I don't know how to pick someone. And so we just went with our gut. Our bank offered baby pictures of the donor. Different banks will offer different things. Some will offer adult pictures. I've heard it's less common. Most, if they offer pictures, it's baby pictures.
And if they offer adult pictures, the sperm banks are excellent at making money, at the end of the day.
Oh yeah, they charge you more for all
Sperm
of
banks
these.
are
Yes.
capitalist
100%.
enterprise, and they have, have they nickel and dimed every
Yes,
element
I think
of the
we did pay
process.
extra for the baby pictures.
Yeah, and you can pay extra for lots of different components.
Sound clips, audio interviews.
It gets really strange really quickly.
It does. And we kind of stopped ourselves at being what matters more to us is the effort we put into picking the bank we were going to go with than the individual donor, if that makes sense. And I feel as though that's a wise choice to make when you can make it, but it is a luxury. And I say that from a place of someone who was purchasing sperm several years ago in a very different economy. But yeah, we chose someone who we liked the sound of the interview answers. They have written interviews at the minimum. And it was someone who, when asked why they were donating, had a really sweet answer about a friend who was donor conceived, and that really meant a lot to me. But ultimately, that was how we went about it.
Yeah, and just another word about sperm banks and the cost of sperm. Also, the vast majority of people in our care are using sperm banks because if you're using fresh sperm from a donor that you don't really need much of our help. You just need our guidance and a Tylenol syringe and you're good to go. But if you're doing an IUI, that is a medical procedure that you need a specialist for. So almost all of our clients are using donor sperm from a sperm bank. The cost of sperm 5 years ago was closer to $700 a vial. Now the last bill that I saw from someone, it was $2,300 for a vial. So there's a company called Seed Scout, which is developed as a direct response to the industry of sperm banks. And so their whole thing is that they help match you with a sperm donor. You then compensate that donor, and then they help you organize wherever you are of how to store their sperm. So it's something called directed donation, but with a hand to hold along the process. I think they have a sliding scale of their services, but it's anywhere from $5,000 to $12,000. They have legal hand holding and all of that. 4 years ago, that cost to me seemed like a pretty boutique experience. Today, and only going forward, the cost gap is getting smaller and smaller. And so to kind of do it feels like farmers market tomatoes versus Costco tomatoes on the ethics around how all of this is just continuing to evolve. So Seed Scout was another thing that's kind of popped up in response to all this.
So when you think about picking sperm, the way I talk to people is it's a decision tree, right? So you have to start at the way top of the decision tree, which is, are you going to use somebody that you know or not? And that is a very personal decision, obviously. There is a right decision for any individual or couple, and that to me is sort of the first decision. If you choose to use somebody that you know, how you approach it, as Ray said, will honestly depend on things that need to get done. So that if you wind up, for example, wanting to do co-IVF, eggs and uterus, you need kind of a reproductive endocrinologist. We have to adhere to guidelines that are established by the FDA. The sperm banks do it, that's all in the background. But if it's somebody that you're sort of bringing along, all of that has to be done. It includes blood screening, urine cultures, a questionnaire that's incredibly weird, including a question that asks whether you've been incarcerated for more than 72 hours. I'm not sure what happens, it's sort of like Cinderella in reverse, I guess. And a physical. So, and it needs to be done within a certain time of the sperm being collected. And then typically there's quarantine, which has now been reduced to 35 days, depending on the situation.
There were a question that popped up.
Yeah, I think there was a couple.
Yeah, I had a question for you, Anne. I'm Molly Kizzy. I hadn't heard the term donor sibling registry, but you said you were perusing it. I had a question about that, and then also about the family limit. Was that something you were thinking about ethically, or
Yeah.
what kinds of thoughts were going around behind that?
So in terms of the donor sibling registry, it's not some sort of regulated thing. It was a website that was initially created by one person whose mission in life, and this one person was conceived in a different time, was conceived in the 70s or 80s, when this was often conducted very hush-hush behind closed doors in cisgender families who were keeping it a full secret. So someone who did not even know they were conceived by donation until they were much older.
It probably came out of anger, the initial
Yes,
starting of it.
absolutely, and justifiably so.
Absolutely.
And saying, look, we deserve a voice. This was not okay. We want to, we deserve to know that, there was a lot of shame and stigma. So just wasn't told. And so it has evolved into, it's got a lot and it can be overwhelming. And so that's the one thing I will say is at times I felt discouraged on it because I was like, well, it sounds like there's no right way to do this. And I just had to tell myself there's a right way because I know what's right for me and I know what's right for my family. But it at least offered some just handy, similar to what you're getting here, just handy little tidbits about the way the industry works, about maybe some questions you want to look up on the website of the organization you're looking at getting sperm from. And also it offers for families not like ours who are doing this now, for families from back before, ways to connect with other donor families.
And I do think that as with anything that you find on the internet, it becomes important to sort through and filter the information and recognize what voices are often the loudest. And that holds true for, as far as I'm concerned, anything.
There's a lot of grain of salt.
Find.
So
Correct.
if any of you are gonna go to the website, I hope you are able to do so with a critical eye, because the internet's a weird place, as we all know.
But that being said, it provides a portal, it provides information, and most of the sperm banks will have their own registry as well.
Yes,
So
exactly.
Fairfax has
So
their
we
own
didn't
registry,
need to
yours
use that
has their-
website to connect
Right.
with our sperm donor families. It was more on the early stages when I was like, what is going on here? Let me read about this. And then in terms of, what was the second part of your question?
The family limit?
The family limit. Yeah, it's less of an ethical thing for me as just factually, I know that there's a chance that not every family will choose to want to have contact, and that's their decision. And my child might someday meet someone on their college campus conceived by the same donor as them. It's unlikely, but the more families there are, the more likely that is.
So not even that unlikely, a different kind of story, but I was at Pride, had a patient come up to me just, to say hi and chat, and, the kid's now this big, and that makes me feel really old. The kid met a half sib in 5th grade.
Yeah.
So, it's definitely out there, so it is something to take into consideration.
I've heard some horror stories of seed banks that sperm banks that have donor conceived people found out they've had 50, 100 siblings, and that even if some banks regulate the amount of potential recipients or parents, that you don't know if that person is donated to multiple banks. I don't know if there's any newer kind of initiatives to regulate or
There's initiatives. I think that just politically, I don't know how long it's gonna be before that sort of thing has enough priority in it. But the horror stories of massive sibling pods usually are coming from pre-1990 of doctors that were inseminating people non-consensually, or more one-on-one kind of donors. At a certain point, I think the sperm banks really did try to get a cap on some of these dozens and
Correct.
dozens of siblings.
Now, my head was in the same place. One of the things I did, which is question, I took the unchangeable data about my donor, blood type, CMV status, height, certain things like that, and did a little looking on some other bank search filters to take a little look and see if I could find someone who looked like him. It was on my mind, but I heard the same feedback from a lot of providers that's kind of.
But you're right, even though Fairfax may have a donation limit and Seattle may have a donation limit and whoever may have their own donation limits, there's not a whole lot of communication within them. It's not like they have to follow guidelines of the FDA for safety, but they don't have to follow, there's no national integrated code of ethics for these things.
And probably the greatest risk actually comes from the very generous soul who you don't know, who is offering their sperm privately. And there are horror stories out there. I mean, there's some guy in the Netherlands who
That's
has,
the one that's been on everyone's mind.
Yeah.
Like, unfortunately.
right. But there's no checking, there are no pictures, there's no data that is there.
That you can
And
cross
some of
check.
these guys, some of these guys are truly doing it out of the goodness of their heart, and others are probably a little narcissistic, and so, the more the merrier.
Or white nationalists.
I
Like the guy in the
do
Netherlands.
think that when you read through the surveys on the banks, I will say, there were some that I read and I was like, this person sounds like a narcissist. Just from the tone of their answers. And those are the kinds of things you also notice when you meet and date someone and interact with them. So it feels similar. It's like, you can kind of get a vibe. I really do think that. That said, like, there is a point, there's this fine line of like, I'm gonna drive myself crazy. And like, the biggest takeaway for me is being honest with my children. And that's personal, that's a personal choice. But for me, it was like, well, the best way to negate the risks potentially associated with that issue of the family limits is to just, in our case, we've chosen to talk really early and off. I mean, my children are 4 and 2.5 and we talk about it.
So I agree that it's personal choice, but there's also data to support the value of early and often. It's kind of like voting. And so there really is data that supports that in terms of, ongoing health, family dynamics, all of that kind of stuff.
Because it's part of our story.
The other thing that Ray had talked about in terms of nickel and diming, that they absolutely will nickel and dime you, so that it's $65 at Fairfax for adult photos, and it's some other number of dollars, or you can buy this heightened membership plan for $149 or $349, whatever it happens to be. But one of the things that they have, and other banks have it as well, just in terms of getting sort of a gestalt or a vibe or whatever, is they do have a statement. They do 30 seconds or a minute for free, but then there's like a 20-minute conversation or something, so that you can perhaps get a little sense of who this person is. And yes, maybe this person is pretending to, but you may get some sense.
That was great. Can anyone speak to any preparations that a couple or an individual should make, maybe like financial or medical?
So I'll do some medical if that's okay. So you had talked about CMV. So there were certain things that were important to you as you were looking through. And so that obviously is what we focus on first, is as somebody is entering into the process, and I think you do the same in terms of, is somebody periods regular? Is there a history of any kind of pelvic infection that may cause difficulty in getting pregnant? Is there any other medical history that might suggest endometriosis? I mean, there are a number of different things you want from the gynecologic history, and that may impact some of the testing that you do. We do screen people for cytomegalovirus. Cytomegalovirus is extraordinarily common. I'm willing to bet that half of us at least have been exposed at some point in time. Lovely Anne wearing her little medical outfit.
I definitely am.
You actually know that you are.
Positive. I wasn't
I mean,
when
it's-
conceived, actually.
But there's certain things that put you at greater risk, like being in a medical profession. CMV is, again, it's extraordinarily common. When we get it as adults, it's like having a little sniffle. You don't even know that you have CMV. There's no name that you put to it. And it's not in and of itself a big deal, but can be transmitted to a developing fetus. And so when we screen people donating their sperm, when the banks do, they do get a CMV status. Because it is so common, they will allow individuals, donors who have been exposed to CMV in the past to donate, but they can't have evidence of active CMV. The likelihood of transmitting CMV through frozen sperm is extraordinarily remote and may even be zero. That being said, we screen the person receiving the sperm for CMV, and if they are CMV negative, we very strongly encourage them to choose a CMV negative donor, which restricts the donor pool if you're at a bank. The other thing that's important, specifically as it relates to donor, is genetic screening. So the donors at all of the banks will get at least a minimum kind of genetic screening, and at most of the bigger commercial sperm banks, they will get what's called expanded carrier screening, which screens for hundreds, literally hundreds of genetic disorders. And so it's important, most of these disorders are what we call autosomal recessive, which means that the egg source and the sperm source, if they carry the same abnormal gene, have a 25% chance of having a child with what might be some horrible disorder. It may not be, but it might be some horrible disorder. So that we think it's important to screen the egg source and make sure that the egg source and the sperm source don't match. I mean, it's one thing if you are partnered with somebody and it happens that you match, and then there are ways that we can approach that as well. But here, you know what,
choose.
You pick another guy, right?
Avoid
You
it.
throw him back into the pond and you pick another guy. So that those are two things that we absolutely will check to help people make their decision regarding choosing a sperm donor.
Yeah, and I think many people come into when they're getting ready to be pregnant of like, what can I do to like optimize my health and my body to like create the greatest chances of getting pregnant? And my perspective on that is like, you cannot biohack your way into like optimal fertility.
I can tell you that is true because I tried it,
Yeah.
and it didn't work.
And the moment that your like phone algorithm picks up on the that you're trying to get pregnant, you will immediately get all sorts of like top 10 foods for this and like vitamins for this, and there's many like tech bro-y companies that are fertility related of like the sticks that you pee on that plug into your phone that can look at all your hormones and all of that. That's don't do that. Like, please do not let all of like the world capitalize on your fertility anxieties. Like, for me the thing to prepare is like, what's your relationship to feeding yourself like? Like, is it difficult or is it easy? Do you eat regularly, or do you need like a gentle reminder to put calories in your body or drink water? Like, that sort of like regulating your blood sugar and like keeping it regulated is going to be really good for ovulating, and it's also going to be really good practice for when you are pregnant and it becomes like a little bit more dire to like put food in your mouth. And there's a number of like vitamins and supplements that like you can take a prenatal to prepare yourself for pregnancy. There's a couple of ones that I would pull out that I think are more important. Like, it is very important to not be anemic. It is very important to not have a vitamin D deficiency. You know, like a fatty acid, fish oil situation is also a great idea. But the main moral of the story is like, if you eat food and you eat a decent variety of them and you do it regularly, drink water, that you're not a heavy drinker. Like, I've kind of thought about it of like, if the healthy alcohol limit is like 7-ish units of alcohol, and then no more than 3 at a time, 7 units a week of alcohol, then no more than 3 at a time. That's like kind of a way to like not stress your body out alcohol wise. Caffeine, like if you are a coffee or a latte drinker, have at it. You rock, don't ever change. But if you're like a energy drinker, then that is the time that we would maybe want to think about caffeine regulation. And then exercise is another really common, like if there is not a physical activity that someone doesn't already do that they enjoy, you do not need to become an athlete to get pregnant or be pregnant. It's mainly like, we want your heart to pump and move your blood around, and we want your joints to be mobile and moving and happy and comfy. Again, it's good to get pregnant, but it's even better for when you are pregnant to have already an activity outlined so that you know that you like, so that it doesn't become like even more of a chore when you need to do it.
One of the things financially we did, to speak to that financial question, if you are at a job that has multiple levels of insurance plans, which not all jobs have, so if you're at a job that has, and like I worked at Children's Hospital, so if you know that each year at open enrollment you technically have multiple insurance plans to choose from, do your research. And it's frustrating because it's not very straightforward. I've never seen an open enrollment book list the fertility services. It's usually something you have to call and ask about, but you are owed that information. So even if your goal, which I hope it is, because it's my goal, is to do, an option that's maybe not going to be as medicalized, because it's fine to do the medicalized thing. It's not as fun. I still, thank goodness, because it didn't slow me down as much. I did some research on which of these plans has the best fertility coverage, and it was actually when we moved over to the practice we ended up working with that my primary provider there said, "What insurance do you have?" And I said, "Oh, I have and I can't remember what insurance it was, but it was a PPO. It was like the mid-level option." And he said, "I gotta tell you, I've worked with them before. Because you are 2 women, they are gonna demand that you do 12 IUIs before we move you up to IVF."
Aetna.
Yep, it was Aetna PPO. They said, and he
It has
said,
just changed. It
Really?
has
Oh,
just
good.
changed.
so like this specific thing is not a thing you have to worry about, but it's a great example of how your providers can look out for you, because it wasn't me that found that out. And I would not have been told that at open enrollment. But it was Art said to me, "It's homophobic and it's not fair because there's not a notary in those heterosexual cis couples' bedrooms like ticking off every time they have sex for 12 months before approving their but they get to just say, well, we've been trying, and then get the IVF. And we would have had to do 12 cycles of IUI.
Which today, July 2024, remind you, is $2,300 a vial.
And that's not with like the medical costs. So because of him, and then because of a friend saying also childbirth is easier with an HMO, I ran the numbers, I like did the research, and it was some legwork, but given that there were multiple insurance plans and the premiums were double for the HMO, but it was like, I'm gonna pay at the front. Not everyone, again, that was a luxury that I could do that research, that I had different insurance plan options, but if you are someone who has multiple insurance plan levels and you're nearing open enrollment and you're starting to think about this process, it wouldn't hurt to kind of like hope for the best but plan for the most medicalized, because it served us really well.
And ask very specific
Oh yes,
questions.
you want to know, especially if you have 2 uteruses in the mix and you're not sure which one, and 4 ovaries or somewhere in there, and you're not sure where things are going to be coming from. Certain places it's per person, the pot. Certain places it's 1 pot. Certain places meds are included in that pot. Certain places they aren't. And so I don't want to overwhelm, but if you start heading down that road and you're nearing open enrollment, you can ask these questions. Like, it's your plan and it's your insurance, and you deserve the answers. So, because it varies employer to employer.
And simply because it has a good color in front of it, or, so Jefferson has something, they have gold and they have platinum. Now, gold sounds great, doesn't it? Covers nothing, covers absolutely nothing. So it really is important to ask the questions.
In terms of what you were saying about preparing your body, I'm a big believer in if it makes you feel good and it's not actively harmful, yet it's not doing the opposite, great. Like, I liked getting the acupuncture I got. I found it really relaxing. But I also really spiraled deep into like a self-blame thing. I'm like start tearing up talking about it. Thinking that I could somehow trick my body into doing something that it was likely never gonna do, or that I was gonna put myself through way too much to make it happen. And the joke in our house is like, I spent 1.5 years or 2 years like putting that maca root powder into everything I ate and going for acupuncture once a week, and like I lost a little bit of weight. I was working out. Now, I didn't stress my body out. I don't think I like did too much, but I did really just like, I cut out caffeine. I was doing all these things. My wife stopped drinking beer for 1 month because she was like a big beer drinker and thought that'll help, and did nothing. Like, lived her life, fed her body, and they got like so many eggs out of her. But it was really validating, because it was like, oh yeah, like this is like what is happening in my body is what's happening in my body, and it's not only is it not my fault, but it's okay.
It's
like,
a medical problem. I mean, it is a medical problem, and unfortunately, you can't control it.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't mean you should go out and start smoking.
Yeah. It doesn't mean all bets are off.
Right, and also it's like the human body, the odds are always against us in getting pregnant, because what our body has to do on a cellular level to make sure that what is a foreign entity can develop and take hold on us. Like, even IVF, which is has the highest likelihood of getting someone pregnant, is 40% per try, 40% of getting pregnant. Higher than that?
Well, I mean, it depends on how old you are, but yeah.
Yeah, it's like, it's all very different. And again, these statistics, like, they've
gotten better.
Yeah, and often they're not pulled apart from like who is getting these procedures
Yeah,
because
who's the
they're
subject,
experiencing infertility, or who's going for them because they just don't have sperm in a relationship. But all that to say is like, our bodies don't want a little alien in their body. So like, and not, again, to like, not to scare anyone or intimidate someone, but yeah, just to like, for future you if after your like third or fourth or fifth chance at trying to get pregnant, you don't start to like spiral into like, what is it about
It's really
me?
easy to do, and it's good practice for parenthood because it's just a preview of what all of parenthood is like, which is feeling like you have control over things you don't and blaming yourself for things. And it doesn't have to be that way. It can be a beautiful thing even if it doesn't go the way you want it to. The only other thing we prepared with was setting boundaries around questions people could ask us. And before we got pregnant, if there were people in our life who we were gonna be involving in talking to about the process when we were ready, we chose to start having those conversations before we were even doing it because there were certain people who we predicted correctly might say some like inappropriate and hurtful things, and it was easier on me for them to say those inappropriate and hurtful things before we were actually in it. And that was the best choice I made because very early on I was able to say, oh no, that's not gonna work for me. You can't say that.
Like, who's the dad?
Oh,
And so we also, I mean, we work with mental health professionals, and you know, have a list that's available for people. And this is not, you know, to evaluate somebody's ability to be a parent, but in fact to help with things like donor selection. You know, what is going to be important to us to help tease some of those things out. And the other part of it is, in fact, you know, the concept of, what do you do on Thanksgiving, right? Do you just not go because you know that somebody's going to say something well-meaning but really, really dumb? And so that you know that they are available to provide support and education along the way, if that is something that is appropriate and seems, you know, might be helpful. Because it's hard. I mean, there's no question about it. It is hard. And as I think we've highlighted, it is unfortunately expensive. And so the likelihood of getting pregnant, if you're in a, you know, heterosexual relationship, you have somebody who has sperm, you have somebody who has eggs, and you don't get pregnant, it stinks, you're sad, you're disappointed. It was free, at least at the outset. And maybe you had a good time, maybe you didn't have a good time, whatever, but it was free. And I think $2,300 is probably on the high side, but even the lower amounts are still gonna be $1,600, $1,500, $1,800, and that makes a difference. And there is one insurance company that I know of that actually covers the purchase of sperm. None of the others do. So even if you have great coverage, it still typically will not cover sperm. And if you're looking at it, the likelihood of getting pregnant in any single one cycle might be 15%, it might be 12%, it might be, you know, it depends on, again, the age of the egg, but it's going to be reasonably low. And again, not significantly different from what it would normally be, but when it's normally free, it's not the same thing. And obviously, you know, I think I'm pretty nice and sometimes I'm funny and whatever else. It's not easy to come into our office. Even in the beginning, it probably wasn't that easy to come in.
it wasn't.
And doctor, there's nobody funnier than Art, right? I mean, at least he thinks so. So, it's hard. It's hard.
It's a lot easier on the other end because now I know that, like, if any of those tries, which there were many of, had worked, I would not have the same kids that I have right now. And so it's a lot easier on my side of this table to be like, man, that worked out really well because I now have that knowledge. It was hard on the other side of it, but.
So
But it's also, just to be clear, I wish that there was someone sitting next to me because I know plenty of them who worked with groups like yours who had like 2 home IUIs. And then
Anytime I get someone pregnant on the first try, I am shocked. I'm like, oh, I'll be damned.
Statistically, it's not like it. It's just not like it.
It's happened a handful of times where I'm like, sweet. And then they have babies now. It's incredible.
And one of the things that I do think is,
I'm sorry.
no, please, we're here for you.
You guys mentioned CMV a couple times. Can you guys clarify what that is?
So it's cytomegalovirus. It is transmitted, can be transmitted sexually, but it is typically not. It's typically transmitted through runny noses and, you know, maybe there's a little less CMV being passed around now.
It is not something discussed outside of the space of having babies, really. Because of that, that's how inconsequential.
And really outside of the space of picking donors.
Exactly,
Because
it's
my
that
straight
inconsequential.
couples at home birth, they don't know what it is.
But it actually
Or why it
should be
matters.
discussed to a much greater
pregnant
degree
healthcare
than
workers,
it is.
actually.
Correct.
So it
we
was
do a
most
bad
in
job.
the-
We do a
yes.
bad job of it.
So it's one of those things, and I'm just like, I'm straddling both of these things, right? I'm a parent who went through this, but I also worked in a medical setting that was very high risk for CMV because I worked in a pediatric ICU previously. I don't anymore. Like if you're a nurse working in any kind of clinical care environment in contact with body fluids and you become a pregnant person, it is important to know your CMV status, because if you already are CMV positive before trying to get pregnant, you don't even need to worry about it. It's done, it's fine.
And CMV is one of the greatest causes of congenital deafness,
So that's why if
blindness,
you're negative before trying
developmental.
to have
I mean, it's a
kids,
real
it
thing.
can
We
be a
don't
big
talk
thing.
about it. It's weird.
So what you need to know is if you're a daycare worker or if you work in like a medical setting and you were CMV negative before starting to have kids, or if you just don't know your CMV status and you work in those settings, your boss, and you should advocate for yourself that you need to not be around patients who have CMV, or especially active CMV, while you're pregnant, because the risk is that you would become, during your pregnancy, you actively acquire it for the first time, and that is when it's a risk to your baby that's growing inside of you. So unlike that, what I just described, which is like you as a healthcare worker, pregnant, taking care of someone with active virus. And again, it's not, there's no stigma associated with CMV, it's just a thing you can have or not have. Like Dr. Gutman was saying, while it's like there's probably minimal chance of donor sperm with CMV passing on CMV to a CMV negative mom, it's still the industry recommendation that if you are CMV negative, you use CMV negative sperm in an abundance of caution.
And I will tell you that there was a recent case, a lawsuit that was brought against the fertility practice. The mom used donor sperm. She was CMV negative. He was CMV positive. The donor was CMV positive. She had a kid in daycare, an older child in daycare. She was pregnant with twins. One baby was born with congenital CMV. The other baby passed away. Did it come from the sperm? Honestly, we'll never know. Probably not. It was a $37 million verdict. So, and it's
So,
a
like,
horrible story. I mean,
yes.
regardless of where it came from,
So
it's terrible.
you would be hearing about CMV potentially in your OBGYN's office if you were a pregnant person who did not conceive using donor sperm. It's just one of the scary things you hear about during pregnancy, that if you are not actively around sick people all the time during pregnancy, you luckily don't have to think about, and I hate that we're scaring you guys. Pregnancy ends up being like that sometimes, and I don't want this room to be like that. There are lots of remote possibilities that you start hearing about, and it can become really overwhelming. Most of them will
But it is important to be able to, as you're alluding to, put it in perspective and recognize how remote it really is.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's easier, sometimes that's harder. And particularly late at night when it's like dark out, and there's nobody around to talk to, it becomes a little scarier.
Okay, let's go into the process a little bit more. Just like how does going through like fertility treatments like influence your daily life, and like I guess how long does it usually take?
I mean, the lowest tech entry level thing that will be done is paying attention to every day of your reproductive cycle. So like tracking what day your period starts, starting to pay attention to when you are becoming fertile. So like there's different phases of your reproductive cycle. So when the egg is maturing, you'll have certain symptoms. When you're right about to ovulate, you'll have certain symptoms. You get to dip your pee many days out of the month to watch for a certain hormone that's a sign that you're gonna ovulate.
With the cheapest sticks you can find on
The
Amazon.
cheapest stick that you find, again, no tech bro products that are for ovulation. Just the things that come in a pack of 50 that just have the lines that you dip your pee in a Dixie cup. And then whatever route of insemination that you're doing. So then if you are going to a fertility clinic for this, then in addition to that are gonna be blood draws and ultrasounds to measure the hormone in your blood and then look at your ovary to see what is about to pop out. And then if you have medications, then you will have medications included in that may help you create more abundant numbers of follicles, and then may also control the time that you ovulate. So instead of watching for the hormone that happens in your own body, you may exogenously have it provided for you to kind of have everything more controlled.
We don't necessarily monitor people with blood work and ultrasound, so part of that also depends on what kind of insurance coverage you have and what you want to do, right? So sure, we can watch the follicle grow, the thing that holds the egg. We can check your hormone levels by blood. As Ray said, we can have you take an injection that causes the release of the egg to time insemination. And we have patients who, because they choose to minimally medicalize what's happening, or their insurance doesn't cover it, who pee on the stick. And I agree, you buy maybe the second cheapest stick that you can find, but you definitely don't want all of these fancy things, the watches and the this and the that and
The
all
ring.
of those other things, right?
Or a ring.
That don't seem to add anything more to that. Some people can tell what's happening in their body when it's happening, and honestly, it's okay not to know what's happening in your body. And that's where peeing on the stick helps. That's where being monitored with blood work or ultrasound helps. And for some people who don't have regular cycles or haven't been successful, then their medications to help facilitate that. I think we typically don't start with medication, and there's ample data that shows that it doesn't increase the likelihood of pregnancy, at least at the get-go, and it does increase the risk of a multiple pregnancy, which may sound super duper cute, little twins in a little stroller or something, but there's a greater risk of premature labor and premature delivery and other complications, so that we actually try to not use medication initially. But again, if somebody has irregular cycles, or you've done inseminations, you've not gotten pregnant, it is often something to move on to. Peeing on a stick, go ahead.
When do you normally suggest people move from one to another? Is it just based on like the person's choice of like, I've been trying too long and I'm over it and I want more help to get to
It
what I
really
want?
depends
Or
on what the whole picture. So like, it's like I had a couple that they were both like 25 and 27, like really early married, 0 fertility problems between the two of them, and one of them after 5 IUIs had not yet become pregnant, so their option was to like keep going with the person who had been trying. Like medication in that situation, like increasing intervention in that situation seemed really odd, because it's like, well, there's no risk factors for infertility here, so it was like we can continue going the same way that we've been going, or we can switch to the other person. And they decided to do one more and got pregnant. If someone is 39 and has PCOS and has already done 4 IUIs and their resources are running out, then that is a different picture than someone who might be in that same picture but has a little bit more financial resources, but is like so afraid of needles, and is like, the idea of doing IVF and that medical intervention is actually more disruptive to my mental health than trying for a little bit longer and kind of running the age risk factor clock out. Like if someone is on testosterone, and like the length of time having to be off hormones is going to be more or less disruptive than others. Like it all kind of depends on what your situation is. I've told people to think about it in batches of 4. Like if after 4 IUIs or after 4 attempts at pregnancy you are not pregnant, let's like touch back in and see how happy or satisfied we are, and to just kind of like keep all of the exit ramps open and like available to us, so that we don't either get tunnel vision or we don't get escalated into something that we weren't planning on doing.
Is there a specific amount of time people generally recommend you stop taking testosterone before trying?
It's usually until you get a cycle back again, and that part is what is dependent for people. It's like, could be as quick as 1 month, it could be as long as 6. It just really depends on how long someone's been on T and how much.
And for most people, it's reasonably quick, and for some people, they will have missed a shot somewhere along the way and actually had a little breakthrough bleeding or something that may give a sign that, gee, this is going to happen really quickly. But we as well will start with a normal period.
And I have 0 experience so far with someone using topical versus injectable. I haven't worked with anyone who has been only on topical, and so if that is part of it, I'm like, I would have to phone a friend.
One of the things for us that like was really important that I hear in what you're saying is that our provider wasn't telling us what to do and saying, well, because of you and this is definitely the right choice, and that instead our provider was looking at it in that holistic lens of like, you're not just a uterus and some ovaries, like you have finances, you have insurance, or you don't have insurance, you might not have the finances for this, or you might be on hormones that you're coming off of, and being off of them is really hard for you, so we want to do this faster versus, there are so many things to factor in. And I think a good sign is if you feel with your provider, like they're not assuming that they know the best thing for you, and instead they're informing you of the things they know and asking you the right questions about your life and your situation. And especially if they are able to be like, oh, okay, well that wasn't what I recommended, but given what you're saying, yeah, let's give it a try. Like we ran into that.
So the only things that are not okay, if it's medically unsafe,
Yes.
right? If we're gonna do harm, it's not okay. And ultimately, it's easy to answer a question when somebody asks me, what's the fastest way to get pregnant? What has the highest pregnancy rate? What is the risk of this or that? But what is the right thing to do? And I have a nurse practitioner who makes fun of me, but I tend to make lists, right? You have 3 options, and there are advantages and disadvantages to each option. But you have to take that into consideration. So for somebody who has IVF coverage, if they're comfortable doing IVF, pregnancy rate is significantly higher. You'll use less vials of sperm and you'll spend less money. Is that the right reason to do IVF? For one person it might be, and for somebody else, absolutely not. Why would I do a medical procedure simply because it might be a little bit cheaper in the long run? I mean, there are pros and cons to most everything, and so it's important to understand what that is and then allow you to contextualize it in based on what is right for you, taking into consideration age, insurance, other potential risk factors, all of those kinds of things.
Yeah, we decided to move on to the next level of care. We never really started at home because I didn't happen to that wasn't something we were looking for. We were hoping to just do some baseline lab work and chat with the doctor and then start some unmedicated IUIs at a clinic. And we initially started with one practice and ended up moving to another. But my initial lab work was pretty concerning for something called diminished ovarian reserve. And that initial lab work, they were full disclosure. They were like, this doesn't always match because there are plenty of women and people with ovaries and uteruses who are getting this lab work and getting this result, or who, if they got this lab work, would get the same result, but they didn't because they just had sex and got pregnant.
Is the ovarian reserve, is that the AMH?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I know people who did not have to use fertility coverage because they had someone with sperm in their relationship who ended up getting an AMH level and then got pregnant the next month before they could start intervening on it. So that number alone doesn't say as much as you think it does.
There's actually good data out there that looks at it. In somebody who is not infertile, the predictive value is very different than somebody who is.
So for that reason, for us, when I saw that number, I said, well, we're definitely going to stay with the practice then, because I'm going to keep on doing monitoring because that was the right choice for me. But our provider said exactly what you said, look, if you were to ask me right now, what's the fastest, most likely way for a person with your ultrasounds and your lab work to get pregnant, I would say, and you have the coverage to do so eventually, I would say do IVF now, but that's your call. What are you feeling? What are you thinking? And I said, I want to try IUI. I think it's crazy that, who knows? And then we did a check-in, and for us, it was a batch of 3. It was let's do 3 and check back in. And after the 3rd, I didn't need to be told by, it wasn't even a matter of my provider saying to me, hey, it's time to move on, which I don't know if they would have said. They asked me how I felt, and in my case, I said, I want to move on. This is really painful for me emotionally and costing us a lot of money too. And clearly my lab work seems to be consistent based on the way I'm responding. So we moved on. But I always felt like having those plans and those exit ramps was really important to think ahead to the next step so that I could say, look, if this one is another disappointment month, how do I feel about the next month, and think about that now.
And what may or may not be on the table, IVF may not be on the table, or adopting a child may not be on the table, or we may internally kind of set a money cap for yourself of once we're 20 deep in this process, maybe we pivot not even just to once you are outside of the emotional dredge of it, because when you are in the process, you're peeing on a stick every day. You are in it, and it can be a little, you can kind of mistake the forest for the trees a little bit. So once you had a discussion with you or your partner about it first, it can be nice to kind of be remember when we said that we weren't going to do this for this long? Or remember said that we weren't going to freak out until this happened?
Before we started our my second IVF retrieval, because my first IVF retrieval was unsuccessful, before I started meds, we sat down and we said, my wife's period was gonna start about halfway through my cycle. And we said, are we gonna wait to start yours until fully, and I said, no. We're gonna be insane and have 2 people on injectable hormones in this house at once. Because we had fertility coverage for both of us, and I wanted her already going before I potentially, to take some pressure off me. And to some people, that would be the exact opposite of what they wanted. For some families, that would be like, that sounds like a bad idea. But for us, it was the right call, and it was offered to us. We hadn't thought of it, so.
The other thing to take into consideration is simply because there's not sperm in the relationship, doesn't automatically presume that where the eggs are and where the uterus is necessarily fertile. And so the other thing that we discuss when people come into the office is what kind of testing should we do in advance, right? So history is boring, periods seem regular. Do you do testing? Do you check the uterus and the tubes before starting a process of insemination? And the answer is, if you were home having sex and that was actually gonna help you get pregnant as opposed to just being fun, no, we probably wouldn't if the history was boring. But if you're spending $2,000, we'll round it down or round it up or whatever, if you're spending $2,000, do you want to double check and make sure that everything is as okay as possible? And there's no right answer to that question.
15.
There's no right answer to that question, right? And so that's something that we generally pose to people as they are getting started, is what makes sense? What information is the right information to collect for you as we're moving forward? Most people honestly will say, you know what, maybe I should check my tubes. It's a lot of money. But there are other people who will say, you know what, I don't want to do that. Let's try, and we're going to keep our fingers crossed and hope that we get pregnant.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions?